I'm so glad that you guys want to talk about this too. Yesterday I introduced this concept of if your compassion doesn't have healthy boundaries, then it becomes like trickster energy and you can end up like being overly compassionate for people that don't deserve your time and energy. So let's talk about some examples of what I mean by healthy boundaries. It's called emotional sovereignty, actually. And what the truth is if you are highly sensitive, if you're an empath, if you have childhood trauma that made you overly tuned into being a people pleaser, there's a lot of reasons that you could have developed a weakness in this area of emotional sovereignty. Basically, what it means is that you have ownership and rights to your own emotions. But the reason that it's difficult for people like us who don't have those healthy boundaries around our sense of compassion is because anybody's emotions at any time can hijack my nervous system, right? My compassion that I have doesn't get directed towards me, or rather, when I'm trying to be compassionate for myself, it automatically includes compassion for everybody else. And so I can't decide where to allocate my care. If my care, I'm like, okay, I'm going to do self-care. Immediately in my mind, I'm like, you know who else could use some self-care? Is blah, 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 blah. Okay. I'm also a 2 on the Enneagram. I'm not a full, I know enough about the Enneagram to be dangerous, but that's another part of my identity that plays into this, and it's why emotional sovereignty is so important for me. So here's a visual. This is going to be so good for you, and then I'm going to tell you about a thing that we could do together. All right, think about a healthy river, okay? If you have a river running through land, it is immensely useful because channeled water feeds the ecosystem around it in a way that keeps balance for the river, for the animals living near the river, for the land itself, yada yada, okay? But a river's only helpful if it has solid edges, if it has a shoreline that is well defined, right? Think about when a body of water loses its shoreline from erosion or whatever else, it floods the whole plain. It drowns out the things that don't need water at the time, and it overwaters things that do need some water, right? It doesn't calculate where the water needs to go in order to keep the ecosystem and the environment and the species, the plants and animals and the land and all that stuff around it healthy. So compassionate people without healthy boundaries are the same way. My compassion floods a room and it pushes people away that aren't open to receiving it or that don't necessarily need a high dose of, people pleasing at the moment, So that's a good way to think about it. And I learned about this when I was in my training for becoming a spiritual director. I learned about what it means to sit across from somebody and listen to their story or their suffering without rushing in to help. Because when I rush in and over empathize with them, I'm actually selfishly taking the experience away from them because I think I'm trying to help them. I think I'm like joining them in their sorrow or their grief, or they're like, oh, that must have been so hard. And we dip into the drama. And maybe that's the shadow aspect of compassion, is that it becomes dramatic or over dramatized when it doesn't have to be. And when I hijack the spotlight, because I know exactly how they're feeling, because I'm an empath and I'm actually coming up with my own scenarios when I've also felt that way, we can get drawn into a wave of emotion, and even if it's somebody else's wave of emotion, it gets merged with our own experiences of that same emotion, and it just becomes one big wave that we can't separate our stuff from their stuff. So healthy boundaries look like standing in a room, listening to somebody's concern or issue or problem or whatever, and recognizing that the value you have is in standing and listening, not in emoting with them. If they're sad, my sadness doesn't help them be less sad. my sadness actually piles sad on and might make it heavier for them to carry, or it might take the storytelling opportunity away from them so that now I'm telling you how sad I am for you, right? So you're hijacking that situation for them. So it does take some practice, and it takes some maturity, and it takes, anyway, so I'm doing a thing. I have decided that it is time to offer a 90 minute blah, blah, blah. I've never done it before. This isn't a pre-canned thing. I hope you can tell from my words. It called the Steadying. It's a 90-minute workshop and rite of initiation. And what we're doing in this 90-minute experience is I'm going to explore the 4 pillars of what it means to stand in a place of emotional leadership, because that's what you're really bound for if you are experiencing some of these difficulties. You're bound for emotional leadership, but you have to figure out those 4 pillars first and put them into practice and yada yada. So we're going to do a workshop and a rite of initiation. We need to recognize that we are starting at a new level of ownership of our emotions, and emotional sovereignty is where we're going to start. That's the first of the 4 pillars. So please join me, but also keep those questions coming. It is so important for people who are highly emotionally responsive to help and teach each other these conversations about how to practically, like, what are the practical tools that help us manage emotional overwhelm. Deeper conversation. See, so good. This stuff is so good. Okay, that's all. Thank you. Let me finish this makeup. It's also why dream work is the place that I learned most effectively to hone that skill for myself, because dreams contextualize our emotions. And like I said earlier, your emotions are invisible, and but your dreams are not.